Hey everybody, welcome to another edition here of Newrez Voices. This is Dave Schroeder. I am super excited for our guest today, Matt McGinnis, who is a relative newcomer to Newrez as a leader on our retail team. And Matt's got an awesome story, and I've just really enjoyed working with Matt over the last several months as he's made his mark and we chart a vision going forward with our Newrez retail team. So Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is pretty cool. I love it. I've watched some of the previous Newrez voices, so it's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we want to do kind of out of the gate is let people get to know you, your journey in leadership and in origination. So, could you start by just telling us, how did you find your way here to New Res today?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd call it a journey, maybe more of a roller coaster in this industry. But yeah, so I think I would start with I'm not in the seat today without experience, just like you have, right? And some great people, right, that kind of have shaped my career and excited to be at New Res and in this seat. So I think for some context for anyone listening, I always come back to like the origin story, right? So I grew up in Chicago, civil service family, big family. And when I was 18, the city of Chicago decided to have a fire department test, and 25,000 people showed up. And my father was a Chicago fireman for 40 years, and I had I had to take the test, put it that way, Dave, right? And I was driving in this morning thinking about our discussion, and I laughed a bit because like without Chicago politics, I'm probably not here, right? If you know anything about
Right.
Chicago politics. And so I took the test. And it took, I think, 5, 6 years just to get a number, a lottery number. And in that time period, went to school, had an internship at JP Morgan Chase, which was really cool, and ended up turning that into a career. So my first stop in this industry was like middle market banking, and formed a really cool, great credit background. 2008 was kind of going on. I wanted to be in sales. And let's just say that they weren't really looking for too many bankers back in
Right.
2008. So it was a cool time to be at a company like that, transformative, really cool. I almost translate it to, being at Newrez, where you have access to leadership. I got to meet Jamie Dimon and see him talk and shake his hand, right? So it was a cool time looking back, an experience that I have a lot of kind of gratitude now for the people that,
Right.
that I worked with. And ultimately, in 2011, had another really good boss on the JP Morgan side. So I moved from Chase to the JP Morgan arm, who pulled me in his office, was nice enough to tell me about what he was doing. He was jumping back into a different industry and or going back to the same industry he came from. And it was nice, like, talk about leadership, and, kind of how I've crafted my own way to lead. It was nice that someone was open and honest and basically said, hey, if you want to relocate in the bank, great. And then I started exploring other options. And my mortgage career started in 11. I worked at really one company up until 2022, which is, you can appreciate. I think that's unique in this
Yep.
industry. And I wore basically just about every hat. I was we argue over to this day, I was that eighth employee, ninth employee. We grew the company to 300, branch manager. I can go on and on about kind of what happened over those, 10, 11 years. But branch manager, worked my way up to what, they tagged four of us managing director, which I thought that was kind of a bank term. I never heard that term
Yeah.
in mortgage. Helped kind of develop a consumer direct channel. I coming from that big family, I like to talk, Dave, tough to get words in, but I wanted to be retail. So I helped grow a retail group. And then I worked my way all up to being an owner of a company. There was a bit of a organizational shift. And then basically in 2022, that leadership group kind of exited. Rates, as you are well aware, went up a little bit. And I would say it was a humbling time for a lot of people. And I just reflected on my experience and where I wanted to be. So really long-winded way of saying, hey, really, grew up in Chicago, had great leaders, great experience. And I took about, I'd say 12 months, like kind of off my work schedule to explore opportunities. Looked at it, actually was really close, got with attorneys to maybe even, you know, uh, move into a mortgage banking role, like an ownership role, looked at broker route,
Mhm.
and I landed at Newrez. for the simple reason of people, the structure, and people like you, Dave. So, I guess I'll end with that. But that's how I got here.
Well, we're grateful to have you. And you bring up a kind of a common theme that we've heard with a lot of the leaders that we've had on, which is make the most of the opportunity in front of you. You just never know where life takes you, but if you do an awesome job with whatever's in front of you, if you treat people right and you do what you say you're going to do, good things just always happen. And you just see these kind of, like you say, these circuitous routes that people have in their career, but they tend to end up in the right place, with good people and interesting roles when you just kind of keep your head down, if you will, in a lot of ways, and just keep working and learning along the way. So with all that said, is there a role that stands out to you in your career that you kind of learn the most from, or have the most memories of forming who you are today and your love of retail?
In terms of a role, I always come to the personal side and then professional, but professionally speaking, I would say the role of my first job in the mortgage industry. I showed up, day one. The owner didn't realize it was even my first day, and was like caught off guard. Right? We're a small company, so I think the role as a loan officer, starting in consumer direct, I was able to get the reps, really good group, people that I just cherish those relationships, still friends with today. And so I would say, like, from a role perspective, being a loan officer, which I've never stopped originating, even in leadership roles. I think it's good to get those reps, and I think that resonates with the sales team. But I would say taking those calls at 9 p.m. at night, on the West Coast, learning about who people are, right? It's more than just, hey, what's your rate? So I always draw on that. I think that first experience, of being a loan officer, I hope I'm answering your question, but I would say, that's what I would, that to me, looking back, getting those reps consumer direct, that's the most important role,
Yeah.
where I've got. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the having those fundamentals, and you said, getting to know customers. I mean, I still to this day reflect back on my first job as a loan officer, and we did a lot of kind of kitchen table presentations and everything. And you see people where they are, and what resonates and why it matters, and families, and you never forget that. And I pull from it every day in one way or another.
Yeah, it's great. And like perspective for anyone listening, in 2011, it was still, we were all FedEx paper. I was going to homes, sitting with, I'll never forget my first appointment. My buddy Joe, who works with us, he still laughs at me today. I went to a home on a Tuesday, and I was there for 3 hours. I sat down with the family and had dinner in a three flat.
Yeah.
I walked in, I had to take my shoes off. It was great, right? I sat down. They didn't sign, by the way, but I still sat there with them. And then the next day, I was in the office for another 2-hour appointment, with a father and son. So Joe always kind of laughs at me, and as you get the reps, not that you don't want to spend 2-3 hours with a customer, you learn to ask the right questions. I think at that 2-hour meeting, I was walking out to the owner's office being like, hey, what's escrow? Right. So yeah, no, it's a good point, right? It's the customer and the journey. But yeah, being a loan officer, I think is where I'd say that was the most important role.
Yeah. And I'll just end by saying, that you talk about, spending the 3 hours and taking your shoes off at the door. I read a lot of customer surveys that come through across our channels, and those are the kind of things that customers really talk about when they write up. It's one thing to get 5 stars, and that's awesome. But I get so much out of reading people's comments, and when the comments come through, it's it's people who have made a difference and genuinely connected with a customer, and they can feel that there's a real care for who they are and their story and what's going to happen with them in their home ownership journey. And it's just it's powerful, and you have to kind of take a breath, like you say, and it can't be transactional to do that. You do have to kind of take off your shoes and get comfortable with people.
Yeah, you do. And we live in a digital world now, and that kind of stuff doesn't show up unless you get the review, right? And for any consumers listening, it's not that easy, right, to get a loan. There's a lot of people who touch a file and love a file. But yeah, I think isn't that why we get in the business, right? To
That's
serve
right.
people and get those reviews, right? I think that's
That's
what it's
right.
about.
It's the good stuff. It's the things that you want to talk to your kids about. It's what you want to build a legacy about why it all matters. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's awesome. And look, I mean, as far as why it all matters, one of the things, like I said, we were super excited to have you join our team. It's a process like anything when you're bringing on a talented leader like yourself. I know you had lots of options in what you were considering. So could you talk a little bit about there were lots of great companies you looked at. We have terrific competitors that we deal with every day. What stood out to you about Newrez? What made it the right choice for you?
Yeah. Loaded question. I think I could talk for an hour on that. I come back to what we let, my journey and the people that I surrounded myself with, mentors, and folks I've never even worked with, at the same company. So when I started out on that path, for me, it was I wanted it to feel one that the team that I had, whether or not they came with me or not, that I was open and honest with them about, hey, I'm going to make a change because I love the entrepreneurial role, right? I just love that feeling of waking up and feeling like you're building, right? And what I would say is I drew on some industry peers, a gentleman who, he runs recruiting for one of the biggest companies in retail. Okay. And, golf friend, friend first, right? Peer second. And he made a comment like, you should really think about skating where the puck is going, right? A little hockey
Right.
term. And it really struck me about like the world we live in and what was important in the team construct, like who I had, what we were, and ultimately, I don't want to say like there was box checks, right? But I've learned enough from being recruited and recruiting and leading that when you lead with what's your rate, or hey, these are things that most companies I would say, um, some are stronger than others and more transparent than others. But for me, it was like what I wanted to be up, in 10 years, right? I kind of looked at 5, 10 years with our team. So I went through a pretty exhaustive
Right.
analysis from the construct of a company to the economic model. I mean, you get it, Dave, right? Like you see what's going on in the industry with consolidation. And what I didn't want to do is go to a place where I felt like I could be acted upon if I was doing the right things day in and day out, right? And I had been in a place with that transition from my, really that 10-year career where some people started to, they were being acted upon. Okay. And it basically affected the entire construct of the company. And hey, we're in challenging times. I think it's a fun time. I think it's a dynamic time in the industry. But I would say the key for me was leaning on people who have been there. I think having mentors, like if you're going to learn how to play golf, right, you need those reps, but maybe listen to your dad once in a while or listen to someone who's done it on a, on a par five when out of bounds is left. It's okay
Yeah.
to listen, right? So I would say I landed with the peers, the mentors, and then getting with people like yourself. I met some incredible people throughout that kind of process. And to be frank, it was really tough because I worked with like underwriters, processors, teammates for over a decade. So to make that change was really thoughtful. I was honest. And at the end of the day, anyone out there who's looking to make a change or explore, hey, call me. I would love to
Yeah.
explain like what I went through, but ultimately you have to do what's best for, in my opinion, it's team first. Like if you're a leader of a team, you really should maybe get their alignment and their thoughts before making a move.
Yeah.
So long, again, a long answer to your question, but um people, it was maybe the biggest driver when I knew that everything else was the same.
And I think, your analogy of where's the puck going is an important one because, you and I have spent a lot of time with some other folks who are thoughtful about where the business is going, not just trying to hold on to what they've got, or, hey, don't mess with me. Let me do my own thing. There's a place for that as well. But I think people with a more entrepreneurial mind, like yourself, who are thinking about where's the business going and how can I be a part of it and can I have a voice at the table? I think Newrez is a really unique place for that. And like you say, we're actively looking for other Matt McGinnises out there who can sit at a table and really think about the business, who can evangelize for what we're trying to build. Um, and are flexible, that can see, all the pieces and parts that we have here at Newrez. It is very unique, and as you noted, and that
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in that as well, that we've got some really special things here, and it's a matter of how we put that together to uniquely fit a market and the talent of the leader that's coming at it. So all those things play together, and I think it's, again, makes it why folks like yourself fit in so well here and see the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm going to steal that recording and send it out. But one thing you said right there was, I just heard like you have to adapt, right? And I don't think anyone should take that as like you're being left behind. The industry, I had a great mentor and owner that I worked with who always said, "Hey, the industry changes every 6 months. Either FHA is changing their MIP, and I always led with that with my originations in my business. So I want people to know what we have here, right? I have not talked to one person who's had anything bad to say about Newrez in regard, right? We're in multiple channels. So who better to really evaluate um, someone at our company or outside of our company to say, hey, where do you fit in? I think that's the really cool value proposition here is if you're willing to work hard and you want to have a voice and maybe you wake up and there's a new opportunity at Newrez, speak up, right? Because
Right.
we want talented people. So I think that's one thing I never had. We were always just, retail or consumer direct tied into just, that independent mortgage bank. And the fact we have servicing and we can go on and on about all the great things we have. But you hit it on the head, right? If you want to have a voice, this is the place for you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you mentioned kind of mentors and how you think about things. It made me recall one of my mentors saying at one time, making changes to who you are in the business, it's not an indictment of the past. That's just growth. Like there's nothing wrong with what we've done in the past or how you've done it necessarily. It's just the world's going to change, and if you don't change with it, you're going to get squashed. And so,
Yeah.
anyway, we're pretty excited about where that's going, and grateful to have you again. So,
Yeah.
and on that point, you talked about retail and consumer direct and your experience in both of those. So I wanted to get your take on, you know, why you love retail so much, kind of that's your lead, if you will, but also how you've incorporated what you learned in direct to consumer into your retail team and your approach to the business.
Yeah. To be blunt, I think consumer direct, and I'm biased, right? There's plenty of folks who've been in retail who've only been in retail. But I kind of come back to something I said earlier. The consumer direct channel, like I was new to the industry. I had a more banking background, but nothing like mortgages, right? You need reps, right?
Yeah.
So consumer direct, I think, is the quickest way to get those reps, seeing credit, solving problems, right? Learning fast. So right. I mean, I always call like our industry, like there's a blueprint to this, whether it's retail or consumer direct. It always starts with showing up on time, working hard, all the things in any industry where you see successful people. But with consumer direct, I would say, we used to send mass mail out across the country. So I joke, and we've got some new talented leaders here from some big companies, right? Talent. And I heard one comment like, well, retail folks, I don't think they really like love refis. And I was like, wait a second, we're retail. We love refis. Right? What do you shout? And I think it come back to that consumer direct background in my head of structure, because you never know when the phone's going to ring in consumer direct or there's an opportunity. And you just have to be able to, there's a lot of balls in the air in this industry and you have to be able to juggle, once in a while. And so I think I took a lot of the consumer direct background into retail in the sense of if you look at the construct of getting business, it doesn't matter if it's retail or consumer direct. You're serving the client. You got to find
Yep.
the client, which is really hard, right? In retail, you got to find the client, or what I would say in retail is developing relationships. Some of the best retail people I have seen don't even have referral partners, right? In the sense of like, they're just good at getting a client and getting 3 loans from that client, right?
Right.
And then really cultivating and developing that database. And then there's some folks who are great with financial advisors and divorce. So I look at retail a little bit differently, with that consumer background. I think you need to take an audit of yourself, what you're willing to do. The old, I don't love the saying, but it's, the sphere of influence, who's your sphere. And it's like a test kitchen, which in consumer direct, we would test, right? I used to send a mass email out, right? And I'd get with the owner and he'd say, "Hey, you're young. What do you think would a good message would be?" And then he'd put it on a mailer, or he would, and then it was great, right? Well, once the mailer would go out, and oh my God, the phone's blowing up, and I would smile ear to ear. I'm like, hey, that was, I had a little piece of that, right?
Right.
Same with retail. Like I think you would agree, we don't have all the answers, right? We just don't. And that's where it comes back to drawing upon everyone's experience. And again, come back to Newrez is why I love it here. We're willing to have that test kitchen mindset. We just so happen to have like unbelievable infrastructure, and we're not a startup, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think blended retail to consumer direct. Retail is all about relationships. Consumer direct for me was like foundation. So when you blend those together, I guess you get me and many other people, I'm sure have that same journey. So
Right. I also think, and I'd be interested in your take on it. It's that I think that generally, or as a generalization, there used to be a view that um, the retail was a face-to-face business. It was, pressing the flesh and getting out in the community. And I think those are still super important and differentiated in retail. At the same time, whether it's COVID or just the advance of technology, a lot of the things that were table stakes for consumer direct, telephone sales, virtual kind of interactions, Zoom like we're doing right now to connect with people. I see a lot more retail loan consultants being really good at that, and particularly in social media and whatnot. And so, any thoughts on kind of how those two have come together over time in the practices?
yeah, I mean, think of the world we live in. You can be retail and be present in a community now through digital ads, right? Like a
Yeah.
lot of this, you know what I mean? Like a lot of it's
Yeah.
just being present with, um, this is dangerous, right? It's probably the most important piece of technology, in my life. And what I mean by dangerous is we can get hooked on this. We could stare at it all day, but right. And I look at this though, is this what people live on? So if you want to be in retail and you want to be in a community and you want to be part of the Chamber of Commerce, you don't have to show up to every event, right? There's new ways to kind of get in front of people. And yeah, so I think my thought on that is we're probably still only in like the third inning here, with this digital landscape. And anyone out there who hasn't fully embraced it, which I could say I haven't fully embraced, the social media aspect of it, but in terms of video, and there's ways to put your toe in the water, so to speak, right? Without completely put yourself out there and posting, long form on the internet. So last thing I'll say about that is for retail, it's a different type of retail. I still think there's something about pressing the flesh, but again, every 6 months, David, industry change.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think, and it sounds like that's where you are as far as putting your toe in the water. The key is to keep pushing yourself or ourselves forward. I do the same thing. I just try to watch what other people are doing and keep forcing myself to be uncomfortable in some of these kind of things and get better. So, to that end, you've dealt with probably hundreds of loan consultants over the years, whether as peers or team members. What stands out to you, consistently? Are there two, three, four traits to you that just every time, when you see somebody who's successful as a loan consultant,
Yeah.
these are the threads that you're seeing?
I come back to a really, really simple concept. The best originators show up every day and do the work. I mean, I think it's a really broad stroke, so I don't know how deep, want me
Yeah.
to get there, but I think you just have to show up. Um, and it's not always about, showing up doesn't mean just showing up at 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, right? It's, do you have a plan? Do you have goals? And if you don't meet those goals, like you said something that really resonated with me about like that kind of comfort zone, like kind of pushing
Yep.
yourself. I think that's part of it, right? As I've grown up in the industry, right? I think about it a lot where, oh man, I wish I would have done it this way. I wish I would have gotten more review. Throw that out the window and just start new, right? Start tomorrow by, get there at 7 a.m. and on your drive in, you'll probably feel like, hey, like I'm ahead of the game, right? So I think you
Right.
just have to show up every day and do the work. It's the most. I come from an athletic background, and we all had coaches growing up, and then all of a sudden you get into a career. They don't call them coaches anymore, right? They don't. And I think you have to realize that you need, always be seeking mentorship, always be seeking that coach, whether it's you, Dave, right? With me or Amy, or someone outside of your company. It doesn't have to always be mortgages, right? Like salespeople. Like if you show up and do the work, usually results follow. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like you say, failure today doesn't that doesn't have to carry over. We start every day with a clean slate, and every Sunday afternoon I spend quite a bit of time thinking about what's coming up in the next week, and I lay out a plan for how I'm going to execute it, and then it's like Mike Tyson. I get punched in the face, and we
Yep.
we carry on from
I
there.
love it, right? I mean, I think that's great, right? I mean, it's your approach to the business, which I think is awesome. So,
Yeah. And so, I mean, like you say, then you get punched in the face by the week, things happen, and you can course correct, and then you can learn from it and say, okay, I could have done this better. I got to organize this way. But, the key, like you say, is having that plan and then showing up and working your tail off to execute it every darn day. So yeah, it's
and every day, two things to add. I had an awesome mentor and leader who would say, "Hey, we got to get off the mat." Meaning get off the mat, like get back in the
yeah,
game, right? I always that resonated with me. I still think about it today. And that's where it is. Get off the mat. And the mortgage industry also has a very short memory. So, anyone listening, no one, no one really cares what happened last month. So, get off the
yeah,
mat.
that's right. Um, well, hey, you mentioned earlier, and you showed your phone
Oh
as
yeah.
a critical element of technology that you use every day, and you reference the fact that it's dangerous too because you can get sucked into just wasting time. That said, look, I mean, we've been in the industry a while. There's a lot of technology, a lot of different software offerings that people can lean on. And is there anything, aside from cell phone, that stands out to you as transforming your business or how you organize your time over the last several years?
So I can't use the cell phone. Um,
Well, you could, I guess, look,
no,
I mean,
no, no.
if
It's
you've
a,
done
it's a good
interesting things on
question.
it, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the phone call still wins, right?
Yep.
In my book, I would just I'm going to be a little more tactical with this, and I guess our buddy Dave Savage will like this, right? Um, but when the industry when rates went down, I had invested in Mortgage Coach and I consider that off the shelf tech, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have been able to do the volume and doing 22 loans in a month. I mean, that's a lot for anyone without some sort of technology. So I think I would subscribe to. There's a lot of CRMs in the industry. I think I've worked on every CRM at this point.
Yeah.
The best CRM is the one you use, right? But I
That's
would
right.
say, the phone for me is that's the answer for me, to be direct. But number two to that, if you don't have, like, if I asked a loan officer today, how do you present deals? And they said, oh, I use email. I'm not going to say that, hey, like if it's working and your production's there and it works for you, great. But I look at the business a little different. Like if there's tech out there that can help you sell a deal quicker or get the consumer more information faster to make a decision, you should try to embrace it. And I also recognize that in this industry, we went through a tech boom, which you don't need 8 pieces of tech, right? Like these shiny new objects we all really like in this industry. This is it.
Yeah.
This is what wins. So
Well, look, I amend. I wish I wouldn't have said that because as you're speaking and I'm thinking about it, you're right. I mean, the cell phone is probably the transformational piece of technology in our industry, if you just think about it from an originator's perspective, I mean, I'm old enough, unfortunately, that, when I started in the business, it was landlines. Like we were plugged into a wall to make calls and whatnot. And you get faxes and you go home at night. Now, you know, at least for myself, the best loan officers I talk to across the country, its availability is the differentiator, and again, going back to the surveys, those are the things customers talk about. Hey, so and so was available to me on Friday night to help me get the pre-approval out, or the real estate agent comments that they were there on the Saturday taking calls. So I mean, it really is, having a cell phone to be able to answer a phone call or respond to emails immediately. We live in that kind of a culture where people expect instant response, instant gratification, and the cell phone is kind of the core of what empowers us to do that. So I
Yeah.
think you're actually right, that probably is.
Yeah. And they should expect it, right? It's what we do. We serve consumers. They should expect us to pick up the phone if we're lending them money to buy a house, right? So
Well, yeah, I mean that, and the fact that there's always somebody else who is. It's like, I
right.
can't remember
Yeah.
if it's Sylvester Stallone or Schwarzenegger or whatever, but one of those guys I know has said over the world, look, they work so hard because they know there's always somebody else who's willing to work harder if they don't. All right, so look, I mean, one of the things that we were so excited with getting you to Newrez was also the team. Maybe you could talk a little bit, as a leader, how have you constructed your team? I guess both in the profiles, but maybe, is there a process design that you've seen fit of how you like to put roles and skill sets together?
Um, yeah, great question. I think well, let me just say this, the construct of the teams I've had and over the years, like different peers, branch managers I've worked with. I think the construct of our, team right now and some people I've worked with in the past that I still talk to, on a daily basis, we've always been it's wide open in terms of a team. So what I mean by that is, if I am the leader, right? My team doesn't work for me. I work for the team. It's another great piece of advice that I always got was, hey, we're in the mortgage industry. We need loans. You're working for your people. So from the construct of our existing team, I have folks who have been CFOs of banks, own their own mortgage company, have written several years of $100 million plus. I have a former professional hockey player. I have a gentleman from South Boston, who was one of the best handball players in the country. Dave, there you go. So the
There you go.
construct is, I think this industry, you'll find that there's not a like a prototype, and I just want to work with fun and great people who are professional. This job is not easy, in regards to putting people in like the right positions, right? Like some people have a consumer direct background, right? My CFO friend on our team, I want to say he's a little more analytical, has a process, right? So you have to be at a company that allows each person to thrive, right? If I have someone today who really good with investment properties, not owner occupied, will do the work and just need some more opportunities, right? With maybe our service clients. I have someone else Dave, who will never call a client that's not his, right? So I think that's part of this business, right? You have to find the right construct. And there are some people and managers out in this industry I respect a ton, and they only want a certain type of loan officer. I'm not one of them. I want people who realize what's in front of us here and the opportunities. So again, the construct with our team is all over the place. Again, people who've been branch managers, owners, really, really successful folks. And I would say, lastly, our construct, there's no room for an ego. And if you don't like the way something is going, speak up. And that's where I come in, Dave. That's when I get to email you.
Yeah.
Maybe you hear from me. So, I hope I answered your question. Yeah, but it's an interesting construct. It's fun, and we're gonna keep growing. I've been here 5 months, and I've already had more expansion with our team than I've had at previous places. So I think it
Yeah.
speaks a lot to Newrez.
That's awesome. And look, I mean, as you're saying that, I agree, or I share that sentiment of just kind of the diversity of people. I was talking to a group of interns last week, and one of the things that I brought up to them, and I say this often, is that this is a hustler's business. I've met so many people in this business with varied backgrounds and styles, and just uh, they bring so many different things to the table, but the common denominator is hard work. Like if they are passionate about it and they're willing to put in the time, like amazing things can happen. You
Yeah.
just see that across the business, and you hear the stories of, like you say, a CFO who got into it and they have this kind of a style, or somebody who was got out of high school and worked in title for a couple of years and then became an originator, and now they're super successful. It's just it's one of the things at the very top of the list for me that I love about this business, is that it is so equal opportunity. Just add work.
Yeah. No, that's spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, I mentioned title and some of the different backgrounds, and obviously one of the places where we get salespeople, but also they enable us as salespeople to have success is our operations teams. Um, and this is a complicated business. As hard as we try, part of the business is things are going to go wrong once in a while. We gotta save a deal. We all have to pitch in together and work on that. And so, what's your experience in how you work with operations teams to, I guess, both create an experience that's perfect, but also when it isn't perfect, how do you communicate? How do you engage with team members to make it right?
Yeah. I think you just said the key word is communicate. That's everything, right? And it is not always easy, which you kind of led to, right? This is not an easy business. Alone dies 17 times, 7 times. I remember, another Dave, right, who was a former owner of a company, he always would say that. He's like, alone dies 5 times before it closes. And it always resonates with me because it's kind of true, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of right. It doesn't matter if it's an easy loan or a loan for my brother or sister. There's always something that pops up, right? Um, what I would say is, the communication part is key. I am gonna like draw a parallel line with like sports. So if the loan officer is the quarterback, let's say, and they get all the glory, right? But operations is everything else. Like we can't get to where we want to be and help a client if our ops team doesn't block, right? Or
Right.
doesn't catch the pass. So I always kind of say to that, any
I love
sport,
that.
yeah, it's a team effort. And what I will say is you also, I've always looked at the construct with ops, and I think a lot of people might disagree with this, but the operation should somewhat be built around some fundamentals of how the sales team operates, not the operation saying this is the way we do it and make salespeople kind of fit in, right? And it's, so again, I brought this up to some other places and like, no, this is the way we run ops. I'm like, well, okay, well, like, Dave's never going to do X, Y, and Z, right? And he does 10 loans a month. Like, are we sure we
Right.
can't come up with a solution? So, again, I think with the sports analogy, it's always a good one. Like, we are a team, we get all the glory. And part of being, you don't need to be a boss, an executive. When you're an entrepreneur loan officer, you're a leader, whether you know it or
That's
not.
right.
And you have to have some I don't know if the word's empathy, but you really need to always look back. Like I remember we close a month out for 30 days and we'd be like, okay, like what's closing in like the first week was always the most important week. So the stress on ops, I would say is possibly more sometimes than the quarterback, the loan officer. And you got to recognize your teammates, at the end of the day. You really have to thank them because they're behind the scenes. Right. So it's a long-winded way to say communicate and have some empathy and cheer on your team,
Yeah,
after a great.
I think you're right. And I think you said it well that, if we just put it through the loan consultant frame, you have to be a leader. And then you have to think about how you want to be led. And so it just makes me think, occasionally I'll see an email where a loan consultant might write something where it just kind of makes me wince. And I want to say, do you think that's helpful to say that to the person that you need right now to
Oh,
help you to get this loan across the line? Is that going to be the way you would want to be spoken to if you were trying to get something done?
do
And
you
so,
say that to him? Do you actually, I have my own
I
way
will
of handling
usually,
it. Okay.
Yeah, I would usually coach that offline and just say, look, I mean, we're all in this together to get this across the line. And I'm just going to say, one, we don't want to be a team like that speaks that way. But secondly, just even if you're just being selfish, that's probably not the best way you're gonna get what you need. It's the whole,
Yeah.
better to get bees with honey. So anyway,
Yeah.
I think you're
That's
right. You
good.
got to look at it as a leader.
Yeah, you do.
So, look, we're talking about leadership, and obviously you've been a leader for a while. One of the hardest things I think in leadership is that there's a lot of competing priorities, whether it's, team members that need development, or the loan that's on fire, or, entrepreneurial kind of things that you want to develop. So all that said, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier with kind of a planning mechanism, but how do you organize your week, your day, and set priorities to win?
Yeah. I would say that is always something I'm working on. I'm always trying to. That's probably the number one for me, the area that I need to improve on. And I don't know if it's just me, um, but as someone who still, throws loans in the pipeline and has relationships, um, have a big passion for change and building right now. And so I look at leadership, in terms of like prioritizing a day. I think I look at it from like I go from the end of the alphabet and work forward, meaning, okay, like what's around the corner, next month, next quarter that I, kind of more macro goals. And I know I need to inch my way there, whether it's sending an email to you or just, staying in front of a topic that's important to the whole team, right? Sales org. And
Right.
then you get to the front of the alphabet, which is, you want to talk about prioritization. This is not the best industry for you because you're going to wake up and think you have a plan. The Mike Tyson, you think you have
Yeah.
a plan to get punch in the face. And if a customer calls, it's all about the customer and the client, and that's where this is why I love the industry. Back to my like many balls up in the air, when I was brought in the business, like, hey, if there's a ton of, you're juggling, right? There's balls in the air. If you don't like to juggle once in a while and get pushed around, this is just not going to be your industry. So to answer your question, I don't have a perfect answer there because I think I'm always trying to, get a little bit better with prioritization, my day to day. What I would say is that it's like, real life doesn't follow a script either. Real life doesn't
That's right.
follow a script. And it's the same for this business. And I think it's the same for most sales businesses. And then, last thing in terms of construct with leadership, it's a part that I'm working on myself too with my team. Never take anything for granted. You should check on your teammates, make sure that their priorities are like, their priorities.
Yeah.
And then from what you said about kind of like the alignment at the top with leadership, again, they're supposed to look around the corner. And I think the best leaders, they own it, right? Like great leaders own the losses, right?
Yeah.
And then they share the wins and say, hey, like you guys did it, right? So I don't, again, kind of a long-winded way of saying I don't have a perfect answer there other than I'm trying to work on it every day. But it's
Well,
like life.
yeah, I think that's for all of us is working on it every day, like you say, because no, very rarely do I have a day that goes the way I thought it would when I was driving into work. So, the one thing I would say though, I like the analogy you use of kind of going backwards in the alphabet.
Yeah.
We're coming out of our quarterly reviews right now as a leadership team, and I sat down with one of the leaders who is on my team, and we were talking about, what do we need to do, and I had suggested to him, you should probably go home tonight and write the quarterly review that we're going to present in 3 months, and then let's work our way back from there, because we know what we want to achieve, we know what our vision is, so let's realistically set out what are the things you want to say when we get back together in 3 months, and then just work your way back. What are the things that have to happen? And you're not going to get every single day for the next 90 days the way it is, but you should probably have a pretty good feel where we should be in 60 days and 30 days, and then we just work it in there. So
Yeah, no,
you're
that's
right. You got to be
a great
clear
call
about
out.
where you're headed.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And last note on that, don't work on don't work on like, he's gonna work on a quarter review. Like make sure that you're gonna have a voice in that next quarterly review, right? You
Yeah.
don't want to do all this work and find out, oh man, I wasted a few hours of my life or weeks here on something that I'm not aligned with leadership, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's important too. You want to work on the stuff that matters. right? And it's going to impact the greater good.
100%. So, well, good. Well, so, on this topic of leadership, which is one of the things that I love talking about with you and all the other folks we've had on the show here, but looking back on your career, and thinking about leadership, you mentioned kind of owning it, and I think part of what owning it goes with is recognizing that we make mistakes and we learn and we get better over time. And so, what's the most important lesson you've learned, or maybe a change that you've made in your leadership style over the course of your career?
Oh man, that's a hard hitting question there, Dave. I think I think as a leader, you need to have some self awareness. I think that's important as a loan
100%.
officer. You need to have some self awareness of what you're good at, what you're not good at. I can say that I have not done everything right either as a leader. Um, I think I kind of translate that to being a parent too, of two great kids. Like, man, like I wish I could have that back, or right, playing sports. I wish I could have that playback. And coming back to what I said earlier, get off the mat or just leave it in the past and work on, stay in the moment, right? So I think, I draw on a lot of the coaching I had, like back to coaching, like so from like great leadership, like I had great coaches in my life, that maybe at the time I didn't think in my head I agreed with what they wanted me to do, but it always came from a place of that they wanted the best for me. So from a leadership perspective, I think with my teammates, I always come from the lens of like nobody wants you to succeed more than me. Like there's nothing better. Like we have a new hire who did 5 loans last month, like after being here for 60 days, right?
Right.
Like I don't even think his laptop working for 45. Like that made me so happy, and it resonated. He came back and said, I'm just so happy to be here, and like
Yeah.
that's like the wins, right? Like that is so incredibly awesome. So, like I said, with prioritization, I'm always trying to get better. I think with leadership, it comes with some experience, and then really that self awareness of it's okay to raise your hand as a leader and say, hey, I don't have the answer, but let me put you
Yeah.
in touch with someone who does. I think that's important too.
That's right. Yeah, I mean it's that's a point from one of from JC, who leads our operations here.
Yeah.
She had made in one of the conversations, and I regard her as being one of the most knowledgeable people I've worked with in the business, for just the level of detail that she can pull on any given subject. And yet she made the point that as a leader, she thinks one of her greatest strengths, and I would agree, is that she doesn't actually know everything, and she doesn't have any problem. She has no ego about going to the person who does and asking them. I mean, I think as leaders, we have to be, open to that and understand that that's not a weakness, that's a strength, to continue to learn all the time, and to bring our team members in where they can help us, because they're typically there on the front line. They're going to know it better and deeper than anyone.
Absolutely. And don't fake it. The fake it till you make it. Maybe in sales, right? Maybe in
Yeah.
some circumstances, but as a leader, getting that answer, like JC, it's a great example. And I love that. Because she's awesome, right? And it's like, hey, I don't have the answer, but I'll get it for you. Instead of
Yeah.
wasting 3-4 hours trying to figure it out, just, hey, pick up the phone, pick
Right.
up the phone, you know?
That's right. That's right. So, um, ending on that note of leadership, as you think about all the leaders and the coaches that you've had over the years, and you don't have to say their name if you're not comfortable with that, but who would you regard as being the best leader, the best coach you've ever worked with, and why is that? Like what stood out to
Yeah,
them, and how did it impact
that's,
you?
that's tough. I'm going to give you two. So I'm going to
Yeah.
cheat here a bit. I would say I had a really awesome, like a great college football coach, Mike Feminis. So shout out
Mhm.
Mike. I don't know if he got my little SXU, Xavier University, dongle on there. He was just awesome. Like, you go through life not really knowing what's going to happen. And I was going to go to University of Iowa and have some fun and go to school. And at the last second, I had a guy I consider him a mentor at school I went to. He's like, hey, like you should, why aren't you going to keep playing? Right. And I still had that fire. And when I've heard it from a lot of college athletes that a great coach at the collegiate level, like I'm not going D1, right, Dave? I wasn't 6'4" and I couldn't throw the ball over a mountain, but a great coach can change everything. Whether it's as a young kid, um, and he was awesome. Like he was the kind of person that challenged you. You're supposed to kind of be a man by the time you get to freshman year of college, but you'd be surprised, right? Like how many folks with the backgrounds, and that was kind of the coolest part of sports and growing up is people from different backgrounds and being a team. So I'd say Mike Feminist, and I'll tag, I'm going to tag him. I'll send him this. He'll appreciate it. But he's a bit of a legend here in Chicago with the program he's built, and he's just a great person. But he's someone you don't want to let down. I think that's a big part of leadership is like, I never wanted to let him down. I have some, again, coaches that I could point to. Professionally speaking, that's a great one. There's a guy, Dave Hansen, who is my cousin, and we're 15 years apart. And I again, big family. I wouldn't say that Dave and I, when I was 10 years old, he was 25. We're at different points in our life, but he was one of the owners of the original company I worked at. And I think you could appreciate this, right? Relationships matter. If you have an opportunity, you take it and run with it.
Right.
And he's probably the best leader I have ever known and may ever. When you run a mortgage company with 300 people, it is really tough, right, Dave? Like you think about all the people that roll up to you and entrust you to have that vision. I've never saw him raise his voice. He always led with empathy and like, how can I help you today? So I'd pick on, a little biased, but it's not because he's my cousin. It's because I worked with him so long, and
Right.
he was just a hard worker. Like he was the first person there, the last person to leave, and he led with action. So I'm gonna pick on Dave, which
That's
I think
awesome.
he might be a little, he'll appreciate. He'll never watch this, but I think it would be Dave. He was it's a tough business, and every person who's ever met Dave, they remember him, and they like him.
Awesome.
So I go with Dave.
Great. All right. Well, those are, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Those are really the questions that I had wanted to talk to you about specifically, Matt. But is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Anything, that comes to mind for you that's in the industry right now, or that's top of mind for you and how you're growing the team, growing the business?
No, I think I'd want people to know, at least internally, that I'd love to talk to them. I see new hires every day. Like if you want to, or externally, you want to know about Newrez and what we're doing here. I would say for the external people, like give us a shot, pick up the phone,
Yeah.
like let's talk. We have a really good value proposition, and if you want to work at a company that is really forward thinking, has amazing leadership. I mean, you think of Michael at the top and Barron, yourself. I mean, Bob. There's just so many people that have been in our business and been in the shoes as a loan officer and a leader. So externally, call us, right? We want to grow. And I guess I'll spin this around. Has anyone asked you a question? Has anyone thrown anything back at you?
I don't think so, but go ahead. I'm ready if you got one.
Who is your best coach? Professionally speaking, or leader, I guess, personally, professionally. Do you have anyone
Oh,
that
yeah,
sticks out?
absolutely. Yeah, I have a gentleman who I would say has been my, mentor for, gosh, it's almost 25 years now. And exemplifies kind of everything that I really want to be in a person and a leader, an expert in the business, an entrepreneur who built his own company from the ground up and has sold a couple different companies. He's the kind of person who, everybody will comment that, when he's at a room or a cocktail party, you'll be with people sometimes who you can tell they're kind of scanning the room to see who else is, is there somebody more important or whatever. He would never do that, no matter who you are. If you're the entry level intern, the janitor, the top salesperson, the spouse, no matter who it is, that he is 100% dialed into the individual. And so, that's the kind of leader I want to be, is somebody that people feel like, I'm connected to what they're doing. I'm totally all in on being an entrepreneur. within the business and growing and innovating. So that's my person. His name's JC
I
as
love that.
well. It's kind of funny. I got
Yeah, I thought it was Dave
JC
Hansen for a
floating around.
second, but
Yeah,
that's a skill. Like I believe
it
that
is.
is a, whether they know it or not, being in that room where people kind of, they come to you, but also being interested in, like you said, the janitor, it could be a CEO. I think that's what people are going to be seeking more and more now as we go forward in this digital age. Like people want to tell their story, So again, it's that's really cool. That's awesome. Is he
Well,
still in
like
the industry? Is he still doing? Is he still in the
he
industry?
is. He is.
Okay.
He's yeah, moved into a different line of the industry, but he's kind of
Yeah,
at that place in his career where he can do whatever he wants.
that's great.
But like I think you're right. I think it's always been important for people to connect like that. But I think you point to something that's important there, that in a digital age and where people are maybe less connected in a lot of ways, that you know taking the time as a leader to actually do that and listen to people for what they're saying and what their story is and how it fits into the business, and how you can add meaning to the work for them, and that's invaluable. And I think people, that's what's going to help people to stick and to really realize their full potential over time. And again, it's one of those things I always come back to. It's something AI can't duplicate. So we got to be thinking about that.
It can't, right? It can't duplicate it. That's for sure. Yeah.
All right, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Matt, for being with us today. um we just appreciate the time. Look forward to all the great things you're going to do with us here at Newrez. So until next time, we'll see everybody later.
All right. Thanks, kid.